Okay, I didn't take a break. It's getting kind of late. Don't have time. Sometimes I take a break to rest my eyes, and that way I can come back with a much better view, so to speak. But I need to get this done quickly. So I'm just setting up the edge for a pass on this side. A lot of times when you do this, it kind of wipes out the nice flake pattern on the other side. So I'm just going to take short, tiny flakes. Just all downward pressure. I'm not even worried about thinning it. Just all downward pressure. That way I don't mess up my nice flake pattern on that side. I'm going to run another flake here. I made a longer pressure flaker, but it's still not quite long enough. I'm going to make a longer EC stick. That way I can drive some really long and powerful pressure flakes that will resemble the indirect percussion flakes. Okay, it's always better to do the base first before this gets too thin up here. So if it gets too thin in the middle, it'll snap when I'm doing this. So I have to put a lot of pressure for the passive flakes. Yeah. Oops. It's not focusing. Okay, so you gotta be careful with that, with this type of mistake there. Yeah, with a lot of pressure, I can, if the material is pretty good, you can blast through areas that are questionable with a lot of pressure. But you have to have a good platform and all that. Okay. And use the passive technique if you can. It helps keep contact with the platform and it'll drive the flake further. Oops. Yeah, I don't want it to release too quickly. Oops, and again, it released quickly. I want to be able to get a good purchase. I don't know, for some reason the edge is not strong. Yeah, it's better. You don't want the edge too strong because then you create an overshot. You know, if you're putting a lot of pressure to get these flakes to release, the chance of overshot increases a lot. So you've got to get those platforms just right. Now that technique used to drive me nuts. Having to be so patient with the material. I just like to, blast through all those obstacles with indirect percussion. I'm getting more now into the patient techniques. Okay, I'm gonna figure out. I'm probably gonna have to lose some. Well, I don't want to lose a length. I want a long point, so I'll lose some width. I could have corrected it by losing length, but I don't want to do that. Oh, it might look funny being so narrow, but oh well. Just a little bit of length. I don't know, I got kind of tiny. Yeah, that's what I get for flaking it blind. Should be watching every flake. I'm impatient to get to the notching part. I suppose all this pressure is good practice anyway. Okay, hopefully I don't snap it. I'm going to try a little bit more thinning on the base. Yeah, I suppose that's okay. Still not as thin as I wanted, but I'm just going to go with it. Okay. Alright, so I got a thin flaker. I don't know if I already showed that. I'm going to go kind of higher up on the stem because I think I'm going to make this base more concave. I'll go as narrow as I can. A lot of guys can go very narrow. I'm just going to go as narrow as I can for the video, and then as I get better, I'll do more videos like this and try to get more and more narrow. This material is kind of tough. So kind of limits what I can do. I am going to have to thin as I go. I wanted to try to avoid that. If you start out thin, you don't have to try to thin as you go. Because I'm having to put a lot of pressure on the point. Material is good, so I think it'll handle all this pressure. We'll see. See, I'm hitting the thickest spot, but at least it won't snap there. Well, hopefully it won't snap at that point. You know what I mean? Well, on the real ones that I've seen a couple of them that have expanding notches with narrow entry. It's very thin in the area that they're notching. It's not quite like this. Just I haven't learned my lesson yet. That was kind of good. I was able to pop out a nice big flake without ruining everything. All right. That'll help a lot. Yeah, on that side too. Cool. Okay, so I switched the tool to a long, thin awl. Now this can be made with antler also. It's just going to be very delicate, obviously. And I'll have to make several of these too to see which one will work. Now, with metal, I can attack a much thicker point. When I get to the videos where I'm using antler, it'll have to be thinner than this, for sure. Now, where there are some that have expanding narrow notch, narrow entry with thick material, yes, I have seen that. I don't know how they do it. I'll have to get some more experience and make some more, try to figure it out. It might be just a matter of strength, hand strength. I don't know if you can see what I did there. I'm just going into the bottom of that bulb. And also going to the side a little bit and popping out a flake on the sides before I hit the middle again. If the middle is too tough, I can pop a flake on the side. But I gotta be careful because if the tool is too wide, if it's not pointy enough, it'll break off the barb or the ear. Now I have tried this with antler and I've had very little success so far. They may have used pieces of copper to do this kind of notching in the past instead of antler, but I'm gonna show on video what I can do with antler tools. It probably won't be able to be this small. The notches anyway. I can do larger notches with antler pretty easily, but when it gets down to small points like this, it gets more difficult. And like I said, they may have had small bits of copper that they would hammer down and make awls like this out of it for notching like this. Now, is there a practical purpose for notching like this? I don't know. I tend to think, no, there really is not a practical purpose. It's just a fancy way of doing it. You can't really do too many of them. It wears it down, wears your tool down very fast. If you're using chert or flint. I suppose if you're using obsidian, it doesn't matter too much. It doesn't wear your tools down as fast. You know what I mean? If you had a piece of copper, you'd probably rather use it for an ornament than a knapping tool, because a knapping tool wears down very fast. Unless you're on obsidian or some other very easy to knap stone. If you have to make literally hundreds of these, and you, depending on copper, you would have to have a pretty good source of copper. Even if it's little pieces to make these little awls with, you still have to have a substantial amount, you know what I mean? Now as the neck gets more narrow, I got to be very careful I don't snap the whole thing. I'm using a pretty good amount of hand strength. I can probably stop there. And not push my luck. There we go. And of course you can expand these as much as you want. Now, does it make a good haft? A good strong haft when the notches are expanding? I suppose it does. But it's just such a small tip that, I mean, you can't really use that much sinew anyway. And the amount of sinew that you can get in there because the notches are expanding is not that much different than it would be without an expanding notch. You know what I mean? Okay. Let's see. I'm using the flat because it doesn't create step fractures. And it snaps off relatively large flakes. To use the flat part of the tool. So it doesn't look like you pecked it with a bunch of little flakes. Because I think the real ones had a lot of bold flaking, not a bunch of little pecks. Is that in focus? For some reason it doesn't look like it's in focus. So now I'm just making sure the edge is sharp. I want these flakes to snap and not crunch. Okay, so hopefully that was in focus the whole time. That's my attempt at the narrow entry. The stone was a little tough, so it was a little tough to get really narrow because I really had to apply a lot of pressure to get deeper in there. So when that happens, I can't have a narrow entry because I'll hit the side too easily. When I'm putting a lot of pressure on it, it tends to do this kind of thing, and I need a larger opening. So that's about as small as I could get with this particular stone. Again, I'm going by memory. I'm not sure how deep these bases were. Okay. A little bit pointier.